Hello, Tech fans, and welcome in to episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On today's episode, we analyze the 42-35 win for Virginia Tech over Louisville from Saturday, and I'll ask Will and Chris what the bigger storyline is, the success of the offense or potential concern on defense. Episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast gets started right now. Welcome back to the Tech Sideline Podcast. It is great to have you with us, whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher. So many great ways to consume the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're so glad you could join us today as we record on Monday morning, November 2nd. We've got our managing editor, Chris Coleman, with us, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart, behind the scenes taking your questions on YouTube for the end of the show, and I am your podcast host, Evan Hughes. This week and every week, the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. The Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. To date, the firm has defended tens of thousands of people charged with moving violations. For free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll-free. The number is 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031. Or you can email the Fisher Law Firm at info@fisherlegal.com. Gentlemen, today was the first day since March I've had to wear my Michelin Man marshmallow-looking jacket. It is cold, it is windy, and it looks like it is that time of the year.
As soon as it hit November 1st, the wind started blowing 30 miles an hour. It's amazing. It amazes me that, like, way back in the day when, like, the settlers came over the mountains, maybe they came in the summer and they're like, oh, this place is really nice. What nice weather in the summer. Like, but when the winter hit, why didn't they all just, like, turn around and go back? Because this place is
make
brutal.
this a summer home.
Yeah, I mean, just like, oh, this was a bad idea. Let's go back to the beach.
So I got all excited because I got up this morning. I looked at my weather app, and it's going to be like sunny and in the 70s for like the next 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, this is great.
Sounds great for Columbia, right?
No way. Yeah. I say something to my wife about it, and she's like, no, it's not. And I'm going, oh, man. See, I was in Columbia, South Carolina this past weekend, and my weather app was still showing me Columbia.
Also, I do think later in the week it is going to get back up into the mid-60s. So at least it was warm on Halloween. Hope everybody had a great Halloween, got some trick-or-treating in, and enjoyed Virginia Tech's 42-35 win over Louisville. We're going to analyze the entire game. We're going to talk about the offense, the defense. We're going to get to your questions on YouTube at the end. But we begin today's show with some big news around Tech Sideline. For that, here's our founder and general manager, Will Stewart.
I guess it's big. I don't know that it's going to really make a difference for our readers and viewers and all that stuff. We have started a lease on an additional office space. I don't want to use the phrase a new office space. It's an additional office space. So if you're looking at me on my own camera, Malcolm, I assume I am, right? So right through that wall that way is another office. And the gentleman who used to have his office there, Brett Malone, Brett became president of the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center a few months ago. So he moved out of that office. And Brett and I had talked a number of times about us taking that office space over. So it's official. We've signed the lease. So why are we doing that? Because everything looks great to the outside world, right? Not so much. So what we're going to do is we're going to move Chris and I out of the TSL office over into the new office space and buy some furniture and computers. And this room that we're in now that the podcast set is in is going to become dedicated to audio, video production and facilities and that sort of thing. So Malcolm and I are going to do a video later on this week that shows you the rest of the TSL office, not just the podcast set. And you'll see that we are cramped here, and we've got some pretty ancient equipment also. So we're going to kind of show everybody that and show you why we're taking over a new office space just for the working part of our operation. So I bring all that up because, yes, that is an additional expense. And, people have been great about sticking with us through the pandemic. And even when there was uncertainty about whether or not there were going to be any college sports at all, everybody kept renewing. Not everybody, but the vast majority of our subscribers kept renewing and kept going. So I toss that out there to, to ask for your continued support in subscriptions. If you haven't subscribed before, give us a shot. I give you a really simple personal guarantee. We don't do trial memberships, the 1 month free thing. I suppose at some point we will do it. But what I tell people is just subscribe for a month for $8.49 a month. If you don't like it, let me know and I'll give you a refund. It's really easy. But so if you haven't got on board and you're thinking about it, do it. Student subscriptions are $29.99. We've got them, and regular subscriptions are $8.49 a month and $84.99 a year. So give it a shot, and we're real excited about that. We've got furniture on order that should, I think, be delivered later this week. So we're really looking forward to that.
Become a subscriber at Tech Sideline. You can read Chris Coleman's article, CC on Sunday, Virginia Tech gets back to winning against Louisville. Very detailed article, and we are going to talk a lot about what he wrote about on episode 147 of the Tech Sideline podcast. So on Saturday, Virginia Tech made a rare trip to Louisville. They knocked off the Cardinals 42-35 and improved to 4-2 on the season. Hendon Hooker did not have an incompletion through the air after he tossed 3 interceptions in a loss to Wake Forest last week. Khalil Herbert ran for nearly 150 yards. However, the Hokies defense gave up 548 yards. Will, what's the bigger story from the game on Saturday? The offense bouncing back and scoring 42 points, or the defense giving up 548 yards?
That is a good question. Actually, for me, I'm gonna dodge the question, and I'm gonna say that what a lot of my Monday Thoughts article is going to focus on later on today is how ready Virginia Tech was to play. I thought they showed up ready to play mentally and emotionally, and that can change the course of an entire game. And Louisville got the ball first, and I immediately noticed. Well, the very first play from scrimmage, Justice Reed runs a stunt right up the middle untouched and sacks Malik Cunningham. And I thought that really set the tone, and it's interesting. So we'll segue into talking about that defense. I just thought they looked really active. I thought they got a lot of penetration. Yeah, they gave up 548 yards. But I thought, and I don't want to go on and on because I know we'll get into more detail later, but I see growth in the defense. I see potential. As far as the offense goes, Evan, I liked the return of the running game where they ran the ball something like 50 times and only passed it 10. I don't know that you want to do that every single game, but I liked what I saw out of the offense too. And I can't pick one or the other which one's the bigger story.
That's all right. That's why we've got Chris Coleman here. Chris, I'm going to ask you to pick one. What's the bigger story?
I would say the offense getting back, because the defense giving up 543 yards. 548. It's not that surprising, and honestly, that game was like the Miami game from last year. You jump out to a big lead,
exactly like,
and then there's a fluke play before halftime. Right? Remember Miami ended last season with a Hail Mary. Mm-hmm. Right before half.
That's the famous fist bump between Mark Jones and Dusty, whatever his last name is. Dvorak.
Yeah, so it was pretty much just exactly like that Miami game last year. Yeah. And you see that in college football. One team will jump out to a huge lead, and kind of the rest of the game they just
kind of hang on.
Yeah, and exactly. So I think the offense getting back on track is the bigger story. Seeing progress from the defense, and we'll get into that later. But this is going to be a Virginia Tech team, and we already know that's going to have to score some points to win games. So they had to get back on track, and they did.
I'm really excited to analyze this game because going back and I listened to a little bit of our preview podcast from Thursday, previewing Louisville and Virginia Tech. I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head. I mean, what to expect from Louisville's offense. Being explosive, but then sometimes sputtering, and then the defense and the score predictions from all three of us actually were pretty close to what ended up being 42-35. Let's start breaking down the game. Let's start on offense, and I want to begin with Hendon Hooker. 2 weeks ago against Boston College, put up some of his best career numbers in an individual game against Boston College. He ran for over 150 yards in that game. Threw 3 interceptions against Wake Forest and a disappointing 23-16 loss. So how does the Hokies quarterback respond? 10 of 10 through the air for 183 yards. He carried the ball 19 times on the ground for 68 yards and 3 touchdowns. According to Damian Salas, the webmaster at Virginia Tech, it's the first time a Virginia Tech quarterback has not had an incomplete pass in a game, minimum 8 attempts, since his stats database was started in 1987. Chris, what grade does Hooker get for his performance on Saturday?
He gets probably an A to an A minus. I say A minus because, like, remember when he threw the tight end screen to James Mitchell, but it was a fake pop pass up the middle? So I don't know whether that was an option to throw or it was a straight up fake all the way. You know, if that was an option, that he actually made the wrong option. He should have thrown it over the middle to the pop pass, right?
Yeah, because Khalil Herbert was running
wide
uncovered
open.
down the middle.
But if he stuck to the play call and didn't ad lib it, then you know he gets an A because that was a very, very good performance. They didn't ask him to throw it all that much. He was more accurate this week. That throw he made to Robinson on first down in the second half, I don't remember if it was the third quarter or the fourth quarter, but it was like a deep
I think it was third quarter.
Yeah, that was on point. And I think that might have even been like a play action. It didn't really fool the Louisville defense, but he still put it right over three defenders exactly where only Robinson could catch it. So
Now I'll go on record as saying I didn't like that play call.
Right.
I mean, it worked out, but just because a play works out doesn't mean it was a good play call.
Well, nobody wants run, pass. Right.
I know it, you know, but I just remember when he dropped back and chucked that ball downfield, I thought, oh, man, you know, and it worked great. He put it right on the money, and Robinson went up and got it.
You got to pick your spots if you're a Tech offense, because if you have to throw it 30 times, I mean, look, they had to throw it 30 times against Wake Forest in North Carolina, and they lost both games. And they threw it 15 times against Boston College and 10 times against Louisville, because they were running the ball and they didn't have to throw it. So that's ideal. If you're getting over 20 throws a game, and especially if you're hitting up close to 30, that's a bad sign. But like, if you just want to look at the box score without looking at the actual score, if you want to do one of those, you block out the score and just read the box score. If it says Tech threw it 30 times, you'd probably be like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, but I think Hendon had a very good game. And actually his preliminary PFF grade is like a 92.
Ooh.
Which might be better than, I forget exactly what his Boston College grade was, but it was, at that point, was the highest of his career. So this might be the new highest of his career. So 2 new highs in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks, yeah.
With his worst passing performance ever coming in the game in between.
Yeah.
So you just don't quite know what to expect, I guess. But I promise I won't write an article this week saying Hendon Hooker has the best game of his career, because I did that last time and it jinxed him.
You know, I asked Chris what grade he would give Hendon Hooker, and I'm thinking about the grading scale. A 92.6, round that up to a 93. That goes from an A minus to an A.
That's a solid A.
So
let me something I was thinking of as Chris was talking. They ran a play twice, Virginia Tech did, that I think is just a wicked play. I remember this back in 1990 when UVA got to number 1 in the country. I was living in Charlottesville, and they had Sean Moore, who was just an excellent college quarterback, and Herman Moore at wide receiver, Terry Kirby at running back. And they had a really explosive offense, and they used to run a play where they would go to the right and fake the option. So Sean Moore's running down the line. He's got Terry Kirby going with him. It looks like an option, and then he would stop right around the tackle and back up and chuck it downfield to Herman Moore. That was extremely hard to stop, particularly if you think about how defenses and offenses were structured back in the day. And Virginia Tech ran that play twice where Hooker, I'm not saying they were faking the option, but Hooker actually tucked the ball and started down the line and then stopped and backed up and threw a pass. And I've always loved that play. It's just really hard to stop because it looks like a run and then it turns into a pass just like that.
It's also like Tech runs it, stuff like that pretty well. Like, I don't know the play you're talking about with UVA. I don't go back that far, but I can imagine that when you've got Terry Kirby and Herman Moore, And, Sean Moore's the worst of those three players, really, when you think about it.
and the option was a big part of college football back then, and
yeah.
UVA used to run the option a lot.
That must have been pretty devastating.
And Herman Moore was like 7 feet tall, and you didn't even need to throw a good pass, just throw it down there to him in single coverage.
Wanted to come to Virginia Tech, but couldn't get in academically, so he went to UVA. That's a true story.
True story.
Yep.
Well, let's continue on talking about Hendon Hooker for a moment. I want to go back to the Wake Forest game because he was coming off such a high of Boston College. Then he throws 3 interceptions. Chris, what should we make of his ability to bounce back the way that he did from Wake to this week?
I think he's naturally kind of a calm person.
He's an even keel guy.
Yeah. So, last week when they were down by 10 against Wake Forest, and he and Trey were laughing on the sideline at one point, and he took some criticism for that. Were we asked about that on the podcast?
I don't know that we were.
We talked about it.
We talked about it in the office.
We were not.
In the office,
we did not bring that up on the podcast.
Right. So it's one of those things where when you lose a football game, you look at his demeanor and you're like, oh, he doesn't take it seriously enough. But if we'd come back against Wake Forest, we would have gone back and said, oh, we came back because he was so calm and cool and collected on the sideline, right?
Yeah.
So I think stuff like that gets overblown, but by fans just based on the result of the game. I think it goes both ways. But I think he is naturally a calm, cool, and collected person. And people like that, they don't range from up here to down here emotionally. I think they're more capable of bouncing back from things like that than some others.
His comments after the Wake Forest game, they were essentially a verbal shrug. This wasn't a good game, but we'll get back in there and work at it and play better next time. And that's coach speak and player speak, but in his case, it was true. So how do you bottle that? How do you bottle that and open up a can of it every single game? That's the question that keeps coaches up at night.
So against Boston College, Hooker ran for over 150 yards in the 42-35 win against Louisville on Saturday. Hooker, 19 attempts, 68 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Listen, he has shown since he's become the starter his ability to be a dual-threat quarterback. But, Chris, I want to ask you this question because he's been so effective on the ground, and we have seen what Virginia Tech looks like on offense when Hooker is not under center. Is there a cause for concern to have your quarterback carry the ball 19 times in a game, even though it's working so well?
It is, especially when he's a big guy, but he's not like a compact ball of muscle like Gerard Evans or something. Yeah, he's lanky.
So do you have? I know he's 6'4", right?
6'4", 225.
6'4", 225 sounds big, right?
Right.
And I bet if you stand next to him, it does look big.
Right.
But it's just
when he's on a football field with other football players, it doesn't look as
6'4", 220 on the Hokies roster.
Yeah. Right. So,
I'd like to see 6'4", 230 or 6'4", 235.
Agreed. And some of those are, there were 2 or 3 sacks, which aren't obviously called running plays, and then there were probably 3 or 4 scrambles, which obviously were not called running plays. I'd like to actually see him start sliding on some of those scrambles.
Yeah.
And maybe you actually get a targeting call on one of those too in Virginia Tech's favor for once.
Keep that tool in your toolbox.
Exactly. That said, Tech's got to keep running him. It's an essential part of the offense. I remember Gerard Evans and Ricky LeBleu did an interview with Gerard Evans. I think it was this past summer, and it was really good. And I remember Gerard saying that I think after the UNC game in 2016, he went to Fuente and basically said, I don't want to run the ball this much. So Fuente changed the offense for Gerard Evans heading into the Syracuse game and didn't have him run the ball nearly as much against Syracuse the next week. Virginia Tech ended up scoring 17 points against Syracuse, one of the worst defenses in the country, and lost the game 31-17. So Fuente tried to do what was best for the player when it was not what was best for the team. So I want everybody to be happy, but if it takes running Hendon Hooker 20 times a game to win football games, then that's what we have to do. Buzz Williams said it best. He said, I'll always always do what's best for a player, as long as it's also what's best for the team. But if I have to do something that's best for the team at the expense of the player, I will. That's absolutely what I'll do. Yeah. And I think Fuente made a mistake there. in 2016 when he kind of succumbed to the players' requests. And maybe he made a mistake last year by going soft on him up to the Duke game, and then he went to him and said, now we're going to do it my way and see what happens, right? Every time he listens to the players, it's not good.
Turkey bacon.
Right? I've actually never had turkey bacon, I don't think. Maybe I should try
I have
it.
no opinion on it.
Yeah. Sorry. Hendon's got to keep carrying the football.
No,
Yeah.
it's certainly working. So that's the thing. It's been a big part of the offense. You look at the last 2 wins for Virginia Tech. He's been a focal point on the ground.
And so we're 6 games in, right? 4-2, and they get 5 more regular season games. Is that right? Yeah. 4 conference games and Liberty. So you start thinking, well, he's made it halfway through. Not really, because he really didn't play the first 2.5 games.
Right.
So I do worry about wear and tear on him, but
He's got that shoulder brace back on.
Yeah, it was not there before Boston College, and
I'm pretty sure it's when he trucked that defensive back with his left shoulder that I was. But remember, I was like, oh, that was a sign that his shoulder's healthy because he put his left shoulder down and ran over the guy, which I'm sure it was the case at the time, but now not so much.
So I would, but Chris, how much of Gerard's decision to leave was the fact we were told at the time that he didn't want to run the ball that much, and that's part of why he left. Do you remember what it said in the interview that Ricky did?
Nah,
Okay.
I don't remember. He said his relationship with Fuente is fine. I think they still text and talk and everything like that. So I don't think it's as bad as people made it out to be. The bottom line is I just think Gerard. I don't know. I don't want to go down that road.
How about we talk about Khalil Herbert running for 147 yards in the win? How much credit does Herbert and the O-line get, considering the fact that Louisville had 6 defensive linemen out on Saturday?
Not as much as they would if Louisville had all their starters. I do think, obviously, now that we're X number of games into the season, 6 games now, there's so much film on Virginia Tech's offense and every offense that everybody knows what everybody's going to do at this point. Like, there aren't any secrets anymore.
You can throw tiny wrinkles in.
Right,
like the play I was just talking about. I haven't seen that yet this year.
Sure. You can throw tiny wrinkles in every now and then, but you know that Virginia Tech, or that Louisville is going to run that outside zone stretch play, and you know how they're going to run it. So you have a better idea of how to stop it. Well, it's the same thing with Tech now. Like Tech, the days of running for 350 yards a game are over because everybody knows what Tech is going to do now. Mm-hmm. And so you're probably looking at 250 yards a game now, which is
about 280 the other day.
Yeah. It's still extremely
really good.
Extremely acceptable.
So, by the way, Virginia Tech's the number 4 offense in the country in rushing offense yards per game. I think number 1 is a Mountain West team that's only played 1 game.
Right. So I have no sympathy. Like, I'm sorry that the Louisville guys got COVID or got exposed to COVID or whatever. I'm sorry for them personally. But from a football perspective, like, I think Virginia Tech lost a football game because of coronavirus, and now I think they might have won a game because of coronavirus. Yeah. So it's all going to even out.
And that's the way it's going to go.
Let's transition over to the receiving core. Big play Trey, 4 receptions, 71 yards. Had a big catch inside the red zone, inside the 5-yard line. Actually, he was about 2 yards shy of hauling in a touchdown. Will, how much more explosive is this offense when Trey Turner is involved in making plays down the field?
Obviously, it's a big help. I don't think Trey himself is 100%. It's pretty clear. He got helped off the field again. Mm-hmm. So we've heard plantar fasciitis, and he seems to be okay for a number of plays, and then there's that one play where he has to be helped off. So I don't, you ask about plays downfield with Trey Turner, and he's still not 100%. So there were a couple plays. There was one where he just wound up wide open. I think they're more a case of blown coverage. I'm recycling the game in my mind. There were a couple instances where he was just really wide open.
There was a play where they lined up in our shotgun formation with 8 in the box, and every receiver was in man coverage, and In fact, they blitzed with more guys Tech had blocking, so they got to Hendon Hooker really quick. So the ball was kind of a wounded duck.
But Trey
he
was
was
so wide open.
Right,
Yeah.
that's probably the play you were thinking about. But because I tweeted after that play, I said they had 8 in the box against shotgun formation.
Yeah.
We're going to have, not to suggest that we're going to have to start throwing the ball all over the field, but we are going to have to make some plays against man coverage here.
Yep. And they did that.
And they did that.
You just one of the things that struck me about the last 2 games is Tech lost the turnover battle 3-0 against Wake and only lost by a touchdown. They won the turnover battle 3-0 against Louisville and only won by a touchdown. With Hendon Hooker going 10 for 10, the margin of error is very thin. And you need every little bit you get. Like, I would have to go analyze the game and see, how much those individual passing plays mattered. What if you don't make one of those? What happens in the rest of the game?
So we just talked about Trey Turner, the impact he had. Someone I want to bring up because I feel like he is somebody in the box score who might not pop up as much, but when you watch the game, he has such an impact, and that is James Mitchell, whether it was the hands teams of multiple onside kicks from Louisville in the second half. But to me, Chris, I watch this offense, and I see the job that for the most part he does blocking and the job that he does just kind of being out in the flat. How different would this offense look if James Mitchell was not available?
Quite a bit different. He's a complete player. He can block, he can catch. He's a smart player, so you can put him on special teams and depend on him to make the right decisions and everything like that. So, gosh, I mean, on a lot of past Tech offenses, Mitchell would have been the MVP of the offense, right? And Darisaw's the best player. Hooker or Herbert is the most important player. But so that means Mitchell's not MVP or best player or anything like that. But there were a lot of seasons in the past where he would have been the best player on offense, right? And that's a good thing. It means we have more offensive talent than obviously what we used to have. I'd also like to give, while we're on the subject of onside kicks, Shebus just does a really impressive job on special teams. That onside kick formation.
Yeah, Fuente raved about that after the game.
He does it. I mean, we were ready for what they were going to do. We had our guy going in motion, and it was a game of cat and mouse. Which way is he going to kick the ball? He was going to kick the ball the opposite way of which our guy in the middle was running. And the reason we had a guy in the middle like that is because you don't want to put that middle guy in a one-on-one situation. What if the kicker just kicked the ball straight ahead and it became a one-on-one situation with that one guy right there and the kicker to get the ball, right? So you would kind of like to be able to have an extra guy there if that situation happens. But the fact that Tech was ready for that, I don't think a lot of teams would be ready for that.
In multiple onside kicks, mind you.
Oh my gosh,
more than one.
I don't know that I've ever watched a Tech game where you've had to watch 3 consecutive onside kicks at the end of the game.
Yeah,
which is a good thing. It means you're winning, right? But it's also kind of nerve-wracking, especially when it's a formation and it's alignment and it's something you've never seen before. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Yeah. And then I had to see it 3 straight times, and it was so crazy that you're expecting it, you're expecting to screw up at some point, right? But Tech never did.
It looked to me like 2 teams that had scouted each other really well.
Yeah.
Tech's had to field some onside kicks so far, and Louisville looked like they came up with a plan for attacking that, but Shebus was already ready to respond. So, like Chris said, interesting cat and mouse.
Louisville's a well-coached team, I think. Now, Louisville's issue is, the announcers mentioned it during the game. They mentioned they've had a defensive coordinator for 2 years in a row now, so they finally have some stability. So the defense has actually improved a bit from last year. But I think, and they mentioned before that Louisville was a revolving door of defensive coordinators. They had a different one every year. Mm-hmm. And this is a program that has a lot of money, and they could afford to pay. They paid Todd Grantham $1 million to be their defensive coordinator. Huh. Remember that? Oh, yeah. So they can pay whatever they want for coaches, generally speaking, because they have so much money. But they weren't able to keep a solid, consistent, reliable defensive coordinator in there for whatever reason, and they were changing schemes every year, right? And this is what happens when there's too much change in your program in a short amount of time. And you look at their defense and they physically they look good enough.
Yeah,
right?
they look good.
Like those linebackers look good in their uniforms.
They look good getting
right?
off the bus.
Right. And this is I'm not talking about their defensive linemen I'm talking about their starting senior linebackers that should be good football players, but they're not because they've had so many different coaches in their careers.
Yeah.
I think
there's something missing with that team. They are now minus 11 in turnovers in 4 of their 5 losses. The one loss where it wasn't that way was I think when they lost to Notre Dame 12-7. If I remember correctly, neither team turned the ball over. Other than that, they're just hemorrhaging turnovers. There's something like 98th out of 103 teams in turnover margin. So I agree. Satterfield appears to be a good coach, but what is missing?
I do think Tech made the right decision to blitz a lot, because as we pointed out statistically going into the game, Cunningham completed something like
27% of passes under
when
pressure.
He's pressured, right?
Yeah.
So you saw that first interception he threw.
Jamari Connor
was right on his ankle, and he couldn't step into the throw. It's like we've said, man. There were 6 games of film on Louisville, and all these advanced stats these days are available to everybody.
Yep.
So even Joe Blow like me could probably say before the game, you know what? We probably need to blitz a lot this week because every time he's pressured, he's terrible, right? So and so Tech's coaches knew that, and they were well prepared.
Quickly, a couple more thoughts on the offense, and then we are going to talk about the defense. But Will Stewart interacting with Brock Hoffman on Twitter after the game, we got to dive into that, because speaking of Coach Satterfield, who's done a really nice job at Louisville in just over a year, Brock Hoffman after the game, of course, this is Virginia Tech starting center, transferred from Coastal Carolina, had to sit out last year, and then in his first season with Virginia Tech this year, he said, quote, "This one was personal. At Coach_Ledford and at Coach Sat U of L. I never forgot, and yes, I do hold grudges. #L's down," close quote. Which Will Stewart proceeds to quote.
I quote tweeted and I said, "Really, Brock?"
I was about to say, not just really, but really spelled REAAALLLY. ... Tell us more, Brock. Which Brock Hoffman did respond. He said, quote, "Told me I wasn't good enough to play for them at App. Then I ended up going to Coastal Carolina University, lost to them 2 years in a row in some battles, and here we are now with an exclamation point," close quote. So I want to talk about his...
to fill in the blanks a little bit, Brock is from Statesville, North Carolina, which is like 80 miles from Boone, where Appalachian State is.
So I don't really necessarily want to get into the exact tweet and why, but I'm going to phrase this question based off that Twitter interaction. I'm sure it's got to be valuable to have a guy like Brock Hoffman in your locker room that's not afraid to go on Twitter and call out coaches. I'm not saying that's a good thing per se, but we've seen the chip on his shoulder. We saw him smoking a cigar after the first win of the year. It just feels like he brings some nastiness.
We also saw him ragging on Aleem McNeil on Instagram after Tech beat NC State.
Well, is there a benefit to having an outspoken guy like Brock Hoffman in your locker room?
There's a benefit to having football players act like football players. It's a line you got to walk. You want your players to act with class, but you also like that guy with an edge and that guy with an attitude. And I think as the years go by, we will talk to more people and talk to more of the offensive linemen who actually played or actually playing on this team. And the question will get asked, you guys had a really good offensive line that year. How much of it was Vance Weiss and the coaching and your own personal development, and how much of it was just attitude that was brought by that guy? It's a legit question, and it's not one you're going to get the correct answer to at this point in time. You have to talk to these people 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road after their career is over. It's the same stuff that when you talk to the guys that played defense in the early mid-'90s for Virginia Tech, and that defense, when they hired Phil Almasian, that defense got better. They weren't immediately a top-ranked defense, but in 93 and 94, they put a lot more pressure on the quarterback, and they just got better. And the whole team got tougher and meaner. Sometimes it just takes one guy,
I Hoffman is one of those guys who's really good at finding ways to get himself fired up.
Yep.
Like he's not similar to Lynn Bowden,
Yeah.
but he is, because like I remember last year, like when the Kentucky game got announced, and I did a little write-up about it and put a couple stats on Twitter, and I said Bowden's a really, really good runner, but he can't pass, basically, is what I put. And he found it on Twitter, of course, and responded to it and said, we'll see, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes out before the game, the day before the game, or a couple days before the week of the game, there was an altercation at, was it the Speedway?
Yeah,
believe so.
at the Speedway.
So the Speedway.
And there was also some story about Bowden's car supposedly getting broken into, and he blamed it on Virginia Tech players.
Something like that. And then, of course, what happened before the game. So, like, I think there's some people that find extra ways to get themselves fired up.
There are people that live to fight. They feed off the energy, the negative energy.
Right. And it's annoying when it's somebody who plays for someone else, and it's great when they play for you.
Yeah.
I think Hoffman finds ways to self-motivate himself, which is a good thing. And as far as the recruiting stuff goes, Virginia Tech recruited him out of high school but did not offer him a scholarship. And apparently the Louisville staff, when they were at Appalachian State, they did the same thing. And from Brock Hoffman's view, at least, some bridges were burned. He flat out said that they told him he wasn't good enough. Apparently Vance Weiss didn't tell him that. I guess Vance Weiss probably said, well, we can't offer you because we just don't have the numbers in this class, right? So no bridges were burned there. And this day of the transfer portal, do not burn bridges.
Don't lie to those players.
Right, because it might not be the only time you get a chance to recruit them. You never know.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more thoughts on offense. I know we're running a little long. Then we're going to get to the defense, and we'll get to your questions on YouTube. Again, this is episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. I want to bring up Raheem Blackshear for a moment. In the game against Louisville, Blackshear had 7 carries for 34 yards. He did not have a reception. We're at the halfway point in the season. Blackshear has 221 yards, 221 rushing yards on the season, and just 5 receptions. Chris, what should we make of the half of the season Blackshear has put together so far?
I don't think he's going to excel in a passing game with Hendon Hooker at quarterback. I think we talked about that last week, or maybe I talked about it in the Q&A on Friday. Mm-hmm. He caught a bunch of passes for Rutgers. Now, if he had a passing quarterback, a natural passing quarterback, a guy who was good in the traditional passing game, I'm confident he'd be catching a lot of passes for Virginia Tech. But that's not who Hendon Hooker is, and I'm not criticizing Hooker. He's just a different type of quarterback, and the type of quarterback you have decides the type of offense you run. That's just the way it is. You cannot fit a square peg into a round hole. So I think Blackshear is getting better in the running game. He's obviously looking healthier and in better shape and everything like that. He's breaking some tackles. He will put his shoulder down and run over you, as you saw the other day. I don't think he's too dissimilar a player actually as the Louisville running back. They're similar in size. I think Blackshear is really, really fast. He just hasn't been able to get to that edge quite as much. But, I don't think until Hooker makes progress as a traditional passer, we're not going to see all of Blackshear's strengths, in my opinion.
I mean, that's a good point, and it's only one game, but, how many plays did Virginia Tech have on offense, Evan? And why you looked that up?
They threw it 10 times. 10
well,
plus whatever.
Hooker ran at 19 and Herbert ran at what, 21? That's 40 plays right there.
61 plays for Virginia Tech, 65 plays for Louisville.
There's only 21 other plays, and you only got one football, and you're only throwing it 10 times, and you just. I think there was a perception when Justin Fuente started here that Virginia Tech was going to run 80 plays a game, and that's just not the way it's worked.
That's not the way it works, and I remember doing articles back then, and generally speaking, the teams that ran the most plays, that ran the really high up-tempo offenses, weren't winning that much. They had horrible defenses, and they weren't winning that much. Like Syracuse under Babers was the best example. High tempo offense. Tech fans don't watch Syracuse play. The only time they've watched Syracuse play is when Syracuse upset Tech that time in the Carrier Dome when Justin Fuente didn't when he listened to Gerard Evans instead of himself, right? Yeah. So Tech fans saw that game and saw, high up tempo offense, beat Virginia Tech, but that's just not how it is. Generally speaking, your high up tempo teams, I've run the numbers. They don't win as much as as teams that run a traditional number.
Well, everybody was romanced by what Oregon did years ago.
You're right,
and it was new and different at that point in time, and now it's not.
Well, and also the thing about Justin Fuente is, yes, he has an offensive background, but he has an offensive background in the TCU program, which
was a good defensive program.
Which was a defense-first program back in the day. Like, I think Fuente is I think he's got a good grasp of both sides of the ball plus special teams
and how everything fits together.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think a lot of coaches have that entire grasp on all three phases of the game.
Yeah.
All right, so last thing we're going to do before we take a break, and then we still have to talk about the defense, okay? It's been a great podcast, a lot to break down. We're halfway through the season. Virginia Tech is 4-2. I did this segment a little bit last year. I'm going to bring it back at the halfway point. Rose, Bud, and Thorne of the Virginia Tech offense. We're going to do this on defense. For those that have no idea what I just said, the Rose is what is working really well. The Bud is what is blossoming. It could potentially be great. And the Thorne is clearly the thorn in the side. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you Virginia Tech offense edition. What is the Thorn, what is the Bud, and what is the Rose right now at the halfway point of the season?
So Thorn first is obviously the traditional passing game. The smoke and mirrors passing game is quite good as long as the running game is working. Right? And it'll continue to be that way as long as the running game is working. So, but the traditional passing game, like when it's 3rd and 7 and Virginia Tech drops back and it's not going to be some kind of fake jet sweep that they're going to boot off of. And
the receivers have to beat one-on-one coverage.
It's just straight up the receivers being better than their opposition and Hendon Hooker knowing where to put the ball and when to throw it. Timing is as much the key as anything. That's the thorn of the offense. And oh, gosh. The
Rose is the offensive line / running game.
The running game. The Bud.
That one's hard.
That one's hard because I feel like this offense is kind of like the area that's really, really good is awesome, and the area that's not so good is pretty bad, quite frankly.
Maybe Blackshear, we just talked about him.
Yeah.
Maybe you see some potential there.
Yeah, I definitely see some potential in Blackshear, for sure. Yeah. You could also say Hendon Hooker there.
I had that thought too.
Because he's such a he's a dynamic player. He's cool and calm like you want from your quarterback. He'd be a complete player if he can improve in the traditional passing game.
Yeah, and what year is he?
Junior, but he'll be a junior next year.
Yeah.
He's on his first junior season now.
So he's got potential if he dedicates himself to the weight room and once he has an actual spring practice,
right? And his receivers are healthy during spring practice. That'll be a key. Yeah.
All right, it is time for a well-deserved break. We just went 45 minutes uninterrupted talking about the offense, and we still have a lot to talk about defensively. How did Virginia Tech defensively improve in the 42-35 win over Louisville on Saturday? We'll step aside for a break. You're watching and listening to episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Welcome back into episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. It is so great to have you with us as we record on Monday morning, November the 2nd. Tech Sideline Podcast also presented by Southeast Regional Training Center and Campus Emporium. Evan Hughes back alongside Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, and Malcolm Stewart. Let's transition now. We spent nearly 45 minutes talking about the offense. Rightfully so. They put up 42 points in the win against Louisville. Defensively, the Hokies give up 35 points, 548 yards of defense. Chris, what should we take away from the defensive performance in the win on Saturday?
Just so much better up front. I know the box score is kind of ugly.
It doesn't reflect it.
Yeah, but they're, Brandon Patterson's whole article about Louisville on Friday talked about how their entire offense is kind of based on that zone, outside zone play that they run, the stretch play, because they have the type of running back that once he gets running downhill and he gets that angle, he's very, very difficult to stop when you get him in the open field, in that part of the field, as we saw right before half, right? But that was the only time he was able to get out there against Virginia Tech. And they tried it a bunch, particularly that third and fourth down play, back-to-back plays that Tech stopped, third and short and fourth and short. And they were just never able to get their bread and butter play going. And ultimately, that's probably why Virginia Tech won the football game, because if they had gotten that play going, then they would have UNC'd Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So specifically, he's where all this is headed is talking about how Alan Tisdale defended that outside stretch play. And so Chris talked about the defensive front playing better. And Tisdale is a guy that, with his athleticism and size, he's Tremaine Edmonds-like as an inside linebacker. The way he can range from, he can slash through that gap and make the tackle. But the defensive linemen have got to keep the offensive linemen out of the second level in order for that to be possible. And that's something, I just think that's something we saw in this game that we hadn't seen before, was a clean linebacker with the athleticism of Alan Tisdale, showing what he can do if you give him a path to the ball carrier. And these ball carriers are not slouches. These guys are fast. So that was really encouraging.
Yeah, it was definitely encouraging. So I thought the defensive line, obviously, I thought from that standpoint they played their best game. Justice Reed graded out very, very high.
Yeah.
Mario Kendricks had his best game by far.
I thought Kendricks looked really active and really good.
Much, much better than he had been playing earlier in the season. And Ashby, I can't even talk. Ashby actually graded out higher than Tisdale by the preliminary grades.
Even though Ashby had just 5 tackles.
Right. But
Tisdale might still be a little shaky in the passing game.
Well, no, Tisdale had 3 plays that everybody remembers. Like a couple missed tackles, and then the Louisville's last touchdown when he lost leverage on the blitz. It was a perfect call to keep Cunningham in the pocket. Yep. Perfect call by Justin Hamilton. And he just didn't stay on his outside.
He went inside on him and let him get out.
And to let him get to the outside. Yeah, so you can't have that.
So the potential's there.
But the potential's there. But and if you noticed, if you go back and watch where Virginia Tech lined up Ashby, they lined him up 4 yards off the line of scrimmage, and I don't know what they did against Wake, but I know before then they had been lining him up 6 yards off the ball. And whereas in the past in Virginia Tech's scheme, he was always lined up about 4 yards off the ball. I think he's not in good enough shape to line up so far off the ball and be able to run and get there. He's just too heavy right now for that. So our alignments a lot of times on Saturday seemed like Ashby was at the 4-yard depth, back to the old depth, whereas Tisdale was still back at the 6-yard depth.
Interesting.
So the linebackers were kind of staggered to a certain extent. Ashby had less ground to cover, but which I think is good for his athleticism right now. It's so strange, and it shows what a fine line there is in college football between being good and bad. Such a fine line. They played well on Saturday, and they were better against Wake. But on the whole, Virginia Tech's linebackers have not been good this year, right? I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. But I also think most people would agree with the fact that if both guys were 230 pounds, that would be one heck of a good linebacking core.
Tisdale needs to be bigger, and Ashby
Tisdale's
needs to be
210,
smaller.
and he needs to be 230. Ashby's 245, and he also needs to be 230. Right? So if those guys do what they need to do in the off season, then they have a chance to be a really good combination at linebacker for Virginia Tech next year.
I want to talk about the defensive line real quick for a moment. I want to highlight Justice Reed. You guys talked about him, but early in that game, you mentioned the stunt earlier in the podcast. I mean, he was immediately in the backfield, sacked Cunningham. We have talked so much about the transfer portal and the job that Justin Fuente did adding so many pieces on offense like Khalil Herbert and like Raheem Blackshear.
Yeah.
But, Will, how big of a get has it been first half of the season having Justice Reed?
Well, given the Garbett situation, it's been pretty big, and
especially when he's healthy.
Yes, and you can see where Virginia Tech's headed with defensive ends, bigger, taller, rangier guys. And as we've talked about before, that's how you defend the modern offense. You get a bigger, taller, rangier guy. You put him on the edge, and he disrupts the passing lanes and contains these mobile quarterbacks, all that stuff. And that's the direction Virginia Tech is headed. It's going to take them a while to get there. And in the meantime, you need guys that can fill that role and plug the gap on your team. He's 35 years old and won't be playing college football next year. I don't know. It'd be wild if he actually did come back.
Right?
Yeah.
He could. He responded to somebody on Twitter
with I'm not coming.
I'm done after this year. Yeah. I mean, you got to stop at some point.
Yeah, he's like 24 and a half. He's not just 24.
He's the Van Wilder of college football.
But he's been and he looked so good in that first game. And we heard he got dinged up, and we haven't heard that he's not dinged up now, but he looks better.
I thought he did look quicker.
Yeah.
I thought his first step was much, much quicker the other day. And the thing is, he's a seventh-year senior, right? He's a seventh-year senior for a reason because he kept getting hurt. So expecting him to be 100% healthy for every game this year was never realistic.
And I remember the discussion about Ryan Williams, what a great running back Ryan Williams was, but he really only spent 1 year in high school and college healthy.
He had one 1,000-yard season in high school and one 1,000-yard season in college.
Yep.
And those were the only 2 seasons he was ever healthy.
And it got him to the NFL for, however long he was there, not too long.
It's actually shocking. It actually shows what they thought of his talent level.
Oh, man.
They took him in the 5th round, right?
The
Cowboys?
A 2nd-round pick.
Oof,
no, Ryan Williams?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was a 2nd-round pick, right?
If only somebody had a computer.
Right. If only someone had a computer.
Could look it up.
But I'm pretty sure he was a 2nd-round pick, and even with that injury history.
Yeah. And then, of course, injuries are what basically knocked him out of the NFL, right?
Oh, yeah. He was never healthy.
Yeah, that's a
shame. He got drafted by the Cardinals, by the way, Evan. And then went to the Cowboys after the Cardinals.
The problem is there's a lot of people named Ryan Williams.
There's a lot of people named Ryan Williams.
Raise your hand if you are dead wrong on this morning of the Tech Sideline Podcast. That would be Evan Hughes. He was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals in the 2nd round. Let's see here. That's amazing. I don't know why I thought he was a 5th round pick.
Just say which pick he was on the
That's what I'm trying to find. He was drafted... 38th overall, so that's a high second round pick.
Yeah,
32nd is the last pick of the first round.
So they thought so highly of his talents that even with his injury history, they spent the 38th pick in the draft.
And for those of you who are not dialed in, running backs aren't drafted that high anymore.
No,
right?
During a preseason game as a rookie, he was injured early in the 3rd quarter. In his first run of the game, suffering a ruptured patella tendon in his right knee, which cost him the entire 2011 season.
Right.
Then in 2012, he was placed on the IR with a left shoulder injury after playing in only 5 games. He was released on May 12th, 2014.
Yeah.
So, anyways, not to go down a Ryan Williams tangent, but
that's a guy I'd like to talk to. Wonder where he is.
Yeah. All right. Going on the theme of the transfer portal, we mentioned how big Justice Reed's been. How about underrated transfer portal pickup of the offseason? Devin Taylor. Interception at safety. No, it hasn't been great.
Didn't have a good game, but had a big play.
Yes.
He was very, very reliable as the umbrella man in Tech's zone coverage for the previous 2 games. Little shakier on Saturday. I think he was supposed to have deep zone on their long touchdown pass.
Run, yeah.
It made Breon Murray look bad, but I'm pretty sure he and Diablo had the deep zone.
Murray didn't help. Yeah,
right.
A lot of things went wrong on that play.
But I mean, if you're the corner, I mean, you high-low a guy. The safety has him high, and you take him low. And if it's overthrown, the safety picks it off. If it's underthrown, you pick it off.
Now, are we talking about the 82-yard passing play, or are we talking about the 90-yard touchdown run?
Oh, the passing play.
Oh, see, I was talking about the touchdown run.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about the one where he was up top on he had deep safety coverage,
okay,
right?
Okay.
On the pass.
He was heavily involved in both of them.
Yeah,
well, of course, any safety is going to be involved in 2 long touchdowns.
Louisville's first touchdown, he came out of his zone to help another defender in his zone, but that defender didn't need help. That zone was completely covered.
Right.
And he just vacated the middle of the field, which gave him a wide open touchdown. So he wasn't as good this game as he was his first two, but he still played well enough in zone his first two where he can get back to that. Yeah. But you gotta be disciplined in your zone coverages, man.
So I want to take a step back and wrap up the defensive discussion with a big picture question, and then we'll get to Rosebud and Thorn for the defense.
Hey, Kay, before you ask that question, can I say something? We have to have our weekly, or not our weekly, but our typical podcast compliment Dorian Strong moment. You go back and look at that 90-yard touchdown run by Javian Hawkins, and watch Dorian Strong pursue. He didn't have a good enough angle. Of course, it's hard to get an angle on Hawkins. But watch his pursuit on that play. He looked pretty darn fast to me. So I kind of filed that one away and thought, So proceed.
For those that weren't listening or watching to Thursday's podcast, Mr. Strong was watching the show and commented live.
I think his mom also
I put his combine camp numbers in a recent article, so you probably saw them too. But they were really, I think it was something like a 4.47 in the 40.
Dang, well, that's what it looked like. It looked fast.
Which, by the way, is that's a really fast time for Tech fans. Tech fans back in the day who thought all the Tech players actually ran a 4.2 because that's what Virginia Tech said they ran. No, they all ran 4.4s.
I think the school record is like a 4.19 or something like that.
I remember Keith Burnell ran like a 4.2 flat.
And he wasn't that fast.
And then he couldn't outrun anybody on the field. Anyway.
So, big picture question. I want to take a step back. So, Virginia Tech wins 42-35. Before we get to Rosebud Thorn, moving forward, second half of the season, give me one word to describe your thoughts on Virginia Tech's defense for the rest of the season.
Improving.
One word. Oh, gosh. I want to say...
Chris is like, should I say liability?
No. I wouldn't say that. What's like a one-word synonym for hang on?
Oh.
It's like, you get to the second half of the season, like, I agree they're improved, and they can get better in increments, but they are capped to a certain extent this year. So just hang on.
You should say persist.
Persist. Just persist.
Just persist in what you're doing.
Time to transition now to Rosebud and Thorn. Once again, defensive edition for Virginia Tech. What's the Rose? What's the Bud? And what's the Thorn 6 games into the season?
Rose is hard to pick.
It really is, because it's like there hasn't been like one consistent force on defense this year.
Yeah.
Or if you'd like, I'll audible. How about 2 Buds and a Thorn? If you really listen, we can get creative here. You know?
All right.
We can change the rules.
Well, one of the Buds is in a larger sense what they're doing. I talked about a few minutes ago with the taller, rangier players, and specifically Tisdale and Barno are examples of that.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to think about what Virginia Tech's linebackers will look like in the future, now ideally they'll be 230 instead of 210, but think Tisdale's athleticism.
Yeah.
And you can see it in this recruiting class that Tech will sign whenever they allow them to sign players. They're all tall, rangy athletes at linebacker.
So the Keller kid that just committed, what position is he?
Oh, he's like a wide receiver, running back, safety. He's listed at 6'3", 202, but remember there were no camps this year, so that was probably his weight from last season.
Yeah.
So he's one of those guys who I think looks bigger and could be bigger than his listed size. Like he might be like 6'4", 210 to 215 right now, and he's got one of those big football player necks.
Yep.
You know? So yeah, I would say, my gosh, we were going on a tangent.
So the other Bud would be Josh Fuga, I think. Yep.
I go Fuga and Strong.
I was about to say.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
And the Thorn would probably be. I do think they have some defensive tackles who aren't great fits for this scheme, but I think the biggest thorn that holds this defense back was the fact that they hardly got to practice before the season started.
Yeah.
And I don't think people truly grasp how important practice is, especially when you're learning a new scheme. If practice wasn't important, they'd never do it in the first place. So I don't think I think they played better the last 2 weeks because they're just now developing an understanding of what they're supposed to be doing.
And the whole COVID situation and its impact on Rayshard Ashby.
Oh,
we're assuming that is why he is not playing as well as he has played in the past. I'm trying to remember the preseason All ACC teams. I think he was the only Virginia Tech first team player, the only
Correct.
one.
Preseason.
This is a guy that they were counting on to be, to use the expression, one of their bell cows.
They had, coming into the season, they were supposed to have the 2 best cornerbacks in the ACC and the best linebacker in the ACC.
I know.
And one of the cornerbacks opted out, the other's hurt, and
the linebacker's working his way back.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can't just expect Justin Hamilton to be able to that's not a next man up thing, right? You can use that term all you want, but guess what? Your next man is not going to be an All-American like your first man. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So I think 2020, honestly, man, the biggest thorn for the Tech defense this year is coronavirus.
2020.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm actually really proud of the fact that hour 5 with a 2 or 3 minute break in this, we're just at about an hour, and we get Malcolm involved here. Time for the questions on YouTube, where you get to ask Will and Chris a question on Virginia Tech football, Virginia Tech basketball, or anything else in general. Malcolm, what's going on, and how's the chat looking?
Got some good questions today. We'll start with one from Ghostwriter93. Does lack of a spring practice hurt a program like VT more than it hurts a program like OSU, Clemson, etc.? One that relies more heavily on raw talent than on long-term player development.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
Not it doesn't help those programs for sure, but I think it hurts Tech more because yes, this is at its core a developmental program. And when you don't have a chance to develop your players, then it's taking away your strength, right? Like if you want Hendon Hooker to develop in the passing game, but then he can't practice, how's that supposed to happen?
Yeah, to talk about it in an extreme way, who wins in backyard football? The best athletes win in backyard football,
right?
Because there's no coaching and no development,
right?
And the less practice time you have, the more what you're doing just starts to resemble backyard football,
right?
So that's a good question, and that's the way we're answering it. It definitely hurts a team like Virginia Tech.
Great question. Thanks for asking.
Mm-hmm. All right, from Jerome Folks.
Jerome.
Is the defense a sign of the new DC needing help or something else? Poor tackling, poor angles, and not shutting anyone down is concerning.
I'm actually not too. I mean, I'm not happy that Tech gave up 35 points and all that, but I think what we've seen is about what you can realistically expect considering all the circumstances they faced.
Yeah.
They're missing the 3 players who were supposed to be their 3 best players this year, which is out of the coach's control. You have defensive tackles your starting defensive tackles are 280 and 265. They're only a real fit for the old scheme.
Right.
Or they're not a fit for any other college football scheme, quite frankly. So, I wish they'd play better, but I don't think it's realistic for them to play better this year.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
What can you say? I just think I think they're bottoming out right now. Not right now, but they may have bottomed out a couple of weeks ago, and then they're on the comeback path, and that path could be a couple of years. Remember, you got a defensive coordinator who also is I don't want to say learning on the job because that's generally regarded as an insult or a negative commentary, but he is only going to get better. And Justin Hamilton has shown, we talked about Alan Tisdale and what they did with Tisdale this week. I mean, that's pretty smart.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they had one goal this past week to shut down that outside stretch play, and they did it. And even other plays like the last Louisville touchdown, it was a perfect call. They just didn't. It was a perfect call to keep him in the pocket. They just didn't do the play correctly.
And he pulled the plug on Dax Hollyfield as his starter.
Well, Clays was already doing that, buddy.
Yeah.
I think that was a Clays thing.
I think so.
But yeah, I think 2 of the things that could help the defense is what we talked about earlier. If both linebackers got to 230 pounds, so if one could gain 20 pounds and the other could lose 15. Yeah. I think that we'd have a really good group of linebackers, but that's something that both of those guys I think, need to be in a controlled environment in the offseason, not at home by themselves.
Yeah.
They need to be in this program in Blacksburg, in the strength and conditioning program to get done what they need to get done.
So Jerome, just tie a knot and hang on, man.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's kind of how it is.
All right, from Joseph Kennedy, what recruits, if any, should Tech target to complete the 2021 class strong?
The thing is, man, we're so busy once the season starts. Outside of Keller committing, I've not paid attention to recruiting in several
There has
months.
been no discussion of recruiting at all.
Yeah, there hasn't been. Oh gosh, they need to take another defensive tackle in this class. Who's the kid?
They need to take a defensive tackle in this class.
You're right. Yeah, that's it.
At least one.
Gosh, who's the guy from the north, Pennsylvania? Robert Jackson? He's like a 6'4" to 6'6" guy, 270 pounds. Some say defensive end, some say defensive tackle. I would take him as a defensive tackle.
That's right.
I'm sure I think they offered a wide receiver commit from Mississippi State. The guy's been committed to Ole Miss and Mississippi State, but now he says he wants to go out of state and he's going to visit Tech.
That's right. His film is real good too.
It was good. It was good. Yeah, he's a good player.
Yeah, it's a
and
highlight film.
he's a big receiver.
Yeah.
which Tech obviously needs.
Yeah.
A big physical.
Catches the
outside
ball with
receiver.
his hands.
Yeah, exactly. But other than that, I just don't know right now. It's quiet, and plus when the season starts, we're so busy that like I don't even have time to.
Well, and so one of the things that hasn't happened is there hasn't been that big visit game, which
Right,
which
this guy's visiting this week, that guy's visiting.
Oh,
This
they're
week.
bringing in 25 recruits, and that's just
not
happening.
happening. Right. So
You know, so your window into recruiting is restricted to who's on Twitter announcing they've got an offer.
Right.
Which may or may not be
you know,
true.
we run 2 Jason Stame articles per week, and a lot of the recruits are saying the same thing. They're like, well, I took a couple visits early in the process, but then they got locked down. I don't know where my recruitment is right now because we're not allowed to visit.
And a lot of kids aren't even playing football.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and some of them are going to play this spring and some of them aren't. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot up in the air right now.
All right, we'll do one more, also from Ghost Rider 93. He says, my perception is that J-Ham runs more of an NFL-style bend, don't break, or don't give up points defense. Goal is to limit big plays, play more zone, and DB over the top. Is this because of the talent VT has this year, or do you think this is just J-Ham's preference long-term?
I think until you get players in there that are fit at all the positions, it'll be kind of hard to tell because he's going to do certain things that maybe he wouldn't do otherwise just because of his personnel now. Like, you want to try to win games, but you also want to establish your scheme at the same time. And, you know, at first he was lining up Rayshard Ashby 6 yards off the line of scrimmage, which I would guess would be normal depth for a typical Justin Hamilton defense.
What he wants to do.
That's
right.
what he wants to do.
Yeah.
But after trying that for a few games, you know, we saw Ashby lined up 4 yards off the line this past scrimmage, this past game. And I don't think that's necessarily what Hamilton wants to do, but he's making an adjustment based on his current personnel.
Yeah.
So you don't know exactly what it'll look like. Tech blitzed a lot this past week. So it's gonna come down to matchups. Like you know, sometimes I felt like Bud would blitz just for the sake of blitzing.
Because it's what Bud does.
It's just what Bud does.
You know, Bud still gets out of bed in the morning and like blitzes.
Yeah,
blitzes a breakfast table.
I think Hamilton, such an interesting background. He played under Bud for 1 year.
Yeah.
Then he played in the Saban Belichick defense in the NFL. So I don't know if you'll be able to sit there and say, "Oh, Justin Hamilton runs this specific type of defense."
My guess is he definitely wants a middle linebacker 6 yards off the ball who's a little taller and more athletic.
Yes.
You know, and that's a guy. So if you pull Ashby up towards the line and he's only, how tall is he?
5'10".
5'10". And you bring him closer to the line, that opens up the middle of the field deep and it starts putting pressure on your safeties and guys like that.
Right.
So that's a pretty tight answer to that question.
Yeah. Really good questions. Thought-provoking. Really
Yep.
appreciate everyone for the the solid questions.
YouTube might be a notch above Facebook in that respect. Sorry, Facebook.
So I started the podcast off talking about how I wore my blue Michelin Man looking jacket today for the first time. I'm going to close today with I always have Twitter open, folks, on my computer in case there's any news that breaks when we're on the show. And I'll close with a thread that involves Virginia Tech football players talking about the weather. So Alec Bryant tweeted,
Alec Bryant, yep.
My first winter, I don't know how I feel about it, with a laughing emoji. And Robert Wooten quoted and said what he said. Someone responds with, y'all know it's sunny and above freezing today, right? With 2 laughing emojis.
All those boys ain't seen nothing.
Tyree Showtime Saunders on Twitter, it's too cold, man, with the palm and
Face
the face
palm.
emoji. This is winter weather. And then Trey Turner jumps in. Y'all boys weak, man, with a laughing emoji. This is a cool day in Blacksburg. Give it about a month or 2, then talk about that weather with a skeleton emoji.
The thing is, like, some of those guys I know took their visits back in like December. Like Wooten and Alec Bryant, remember they were late.
Yeah, they were late.
Yeah. So
Must have been a
it
good
might have
day.
been a warm. What I remember about my freshman year at Tech was the Miami game. 2001 Miami game.
Oh, yeah.
It was on
December 1st.
It was on December 1st, and I wore shorts. It was like 75 degrees.
It was in
Now,
yeah.
but when I camped out for tickets to the game in mid-October, it was like 30 degrees that night.
Yeah.
So Blacksburg is just a strange place.
Those Texas guys just got to hang in there.
They
man.
got to hang in there, persist.
You know, order yourself a good coat online and good pair of boots or whatever. And
I hope they don't have to experience walking across the drill field at 8:30 in the morning on February.
There's no in-person
All
classes.
their classes are online this year, so
There's no walking across the drill
really the
field.
real answer to that question is, hey, just wait till next year.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I hope everyone stays warm out there, and know that we'll be bringing the heat back on Thursday for episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast when Virginia Tech hosts number 25 undefeated Liberty in Lane Stadium. I'm going to ask Will and Chris on Thursday, does Liberty pose a threat to Virginia Tech long term on Thursday? You're not going to want to miss that podcast. It's going to be
I will tell you, short term, the big threat is Virginia Tech. They need to show up ready to play. If they show up ready to play, I think they'll be all right.
Again, the Hokies, get this, open as 16.5-point favorites, and we can talk about it, but Liberty is ranked 25th in the country, and Virginia Tech just received 11 points in the AP Top 25 voting poll yesterday. So, anyways, we get a lot to dive into, but the Hokies hosting an in-state team, their only non-conference game, and it's against a top 25 opponent. And one interesting note, by the way, Damian South points out on Twitter, it's the first time ever that Virginia Tech hosts a team ranked 25th in the AP poll. How about that for a random, interesting stat to close the podcast? So, hope you can join us then. That's on Thursday afternoon. It'll be episode 140 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We will preview Virginia Tech and number 25 Liberty as the Hokies look to move to 5-2. But that'll do it for today's recap episode. Virginia Tech knocking off Louisville 42-35. I'll close the podcast with the same final question I always do to Chris Coleman. What's coming up on TSL this week, Chris?
Oh, we will have Brandon Patterson breaking down the Louisville game. We'll have Monday Thoughts this afternoon, I assume.
I will say I'm not sure Monday Thoughts is going to be very good today. I know that's not exactly a sales tool, but it's just weird. I was working on it last night, and sometimes you just feel it, and it just goes in a certain direction. But what time we got here? It is
11:15.
It's 11:15, 11:20. Man, I got to get on it and get some inspiration.
I'm holding everybody back. All right, that'll do it. Episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Hope everyone can join us on Thursday. That'll do it for us. From managing editor Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart. I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes, saying so long, and thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 147 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.